Okay, so Hank Wright, I am going to hand you the floor. I will give you sharing. I'll give you screen sharing, but if you'd like me to share what you sent to me, I'm happy to do that. And so everyone, please welcome Hank Wright. He's a Palisadian and he operates our ham radio over at the American Legion. He's got a lot to tell us about, so welcome.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity. And still saying host has disabled me from sharing the screen. So let's try that again. All right. Can you check that again there, Marianne? There we go. All right. Let's see if we can get this to go. Boink. And share.
Thank you.
All right. Can everybody see that?
Yes, we can.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
So my name is Hank Wright, and as Miriam said, I'm a resident here in the Palisades. I've been in the Palisades since I think 91 or something like that. So it's been a bit. And so anyway, I'm a member of the Los Angeles Fire Department's Auxiliary Communication Service in Battalion 9. And so I just have a quick little map that shows Battalion 9. And this is where all of our volunteers cover. So it's 23, 69, 19, and going off into Westwood, Bel Air Estates and all that area. And so what we do is we provide backup in the situation where there is a total failure of communications throughout the city.
Take it.
Yep.
But you got to go down underneath and
No, you're hardly charged at all. I'll get this one.
I will mute everyone. I apologize.
Okay. Let me
Go
know
ahead.
when you want me to start.
Yes, we're all paying attention. Please go ahead.
Okay, great. So our primary purpose is to provide backup throughout the city of Los Angeles if cells go down or they can't communicate, first responders. And so this becomes very important in situations like the Northridge earthquake, where because of the problems that they had to put a LAPD cruiser every mile across the valley to be able to send information back to LAPD headquarters. And so City of LA has a backup mechanism for that now. It's run out of LAFD, and that's what ACS does. All right, let me go to the next one. And so I was asked to kind of come in and talk to you about, what do we do as it regards to communication and all that. So I'm going to quickly run through some stuff and I can address what Miriam talked about, which is that they're taking away the copper, which was traditionally what we said every house should have a copper line going into it because it's the most robust communication method. Thing I want to point everyone to is certla.com, and on this URL, they have a really great emergency preparation guide. It goes through all the different kinds of things that happens, from tsunami to medical to earthquake to fire and all those things. And it's a really great resource that's available. And you can be able to kind of go down here and it tells you who to call, what's your phone number of your local spot and all that. And I've seen a lot of these, and this came out of Cal Northridge, and they produced it there for the city of LA, and I think it's a really great resource. Everyone should get one. It's free. You can download it and print it out, whatever you like. Some of the real important information that kind of comes along here is that there is various mechanisms by which we can be alerted of problems. But you'll notice that most of them, the primary ones that we're all used to are over our cell phones or over the telephones. But having spent time during emergency situations down at LA's Emergency Operations Center, the first thing that they do is they turn on the television. And that's because, they have eyes in the sky. And so they'll have this big situational awareness that talks about the crisis and all that on the main screen. And then around the sides of that, they will have each of the stations. And so it really provides them a great situational awareness. So some of the ways that citizens get that same kind of thing is turn on your television, turn on your AM radio, and you also can get these things that are called WIA, and that's the wireless emergency alerts. Those come in over your cell phone, and it's very specific areas. So it's kind of like a reverse 911. The other thing is an application that I encourage everyone to download, and it's called Notify LA. And this is an app that you can be able to get on there, and they will update you on things that aren't quite, it's coming, you better run kind of things, right? So it's much more of a situation where you want to know what's going on. Maybe you have some friends that are in an affected area, and you can be able to do that. There's also the Citizen app, which I find a little alarmist, but it's pretty good. Again, these things are tailorable to what you want to be able to do. There's some websites. The most important one is the National Weather Service. And that's really good for situations where we're dealing with environmental things. And so like flood or even on fire where there's wind kind of conditions that you want to be able to know about. My parents were up in the Woolsey fire and they were in Ojai. And even though the fire had passed through, I found it amazingly difficult to be able to figure out what was the air quality. They were camping at our house, and that would have really helped in that situation to be able to get that. And so the other thing on wildfire, which I think is probably the primary threat here, is the alertwildfire.org. What they've done is they have put various cameras throughout the county, and you can be able to access those and see them. And it's continually being built out. There are several that look down into Mandeville Canyon. So anyway, I encourage everyone to go and use these resources, understand what they are. And I cannot stress to you enough that when it happens, when stuff hits the fan, all your chance for preparation are over. It's all how prepared were you? And what we find in today's kind of, just in time world that we're all used to is that when that happens, most people are not prepared. They're just used to, oh, I can go onto Amazon, I can order this, I can do that, and I can do these things. That doesn't happen in the event of a catastrophic, rapid degradation of our environment. So communication is the whole foundation of our world. And the biggest innovation that we have done in communication is being able to communicate amongst ourselves almost seamlessly. We can pick up a cell phone, we can get on the Zoom call, we can be able to do all these things. And, imagine what the pandemic would have been like if we didn't have Zoom, right? It would have been just, people would have gone even crazier. So anyway, this communication is really, really important. But what happens if the infrastructure fails? What happens if it's destroyed, say by a fire or a tsunami, or like what happened a couple years ago? There was a homeless vehicle that caught on fire down at PCH. It was underneath some wires. Those wires were burned and they contained all of the internet connectivity for the Palisades going along PCH, and it melted them. And so they drooped down. I run my business out of my house. So it's just like, now what, right? And so these are the kinds of things that you have to kind of just think through. And so wires can come down, cell towers have varying degrees of resiliency. Yes, they have batteries. They're a lot better than they used to be. The AT&T FirstNet, they can be able to bring on a, wireless on wheels kinds of technologies and these things. But if there is something that's really bad, they're not going to have enough resources. And this is the biggest thing that I want to be able to kind of drive into everyone's, thinking process, is that if you don't have a plan, you're planning to fail. And it doesn't have to be a really complex plan. And it's like what my wife put together is, who can I be able to call? How are we going to communicate? Like one day I was in a meeting and I got a text from my son and he says, I'm okay. It's 12 o'clock and I'm kind of going, okay, he's on the East Coast. And I'm going, what? So I get on my phone, he's in Boston. I'm trying to look, there's nothing going on. What do you mean you're okay? And turns out that when the Boston bombing happened, they turned off all the phones, because that's another mechanism where the bad guys can be able to use communications too. And so he happened to be in a library where he had, Wi-Fi, and he was able to do that. And we already had a communication plan, so he knew what to do. As it relates to copper lines, is that copper lines are what, we used to call it plain old telephone service. Everyone had a phone in their house. And the thing that was really interesting about that, from an emergency preparation standpoint, is that they would work when all the power would go out. And for decades, the FCC mandated that the phone companies had to maintain the copper lines going into your house. They had to provide 911 connectivity and all that. And that all started to change in the early 2000s as things came along and the large corporations decided that these really expensive copper lines are expensive to maintain and all that. And a couple of years ago, much to my chagrin, I noticed that the FCC relieved them of their obligation to maintain that mechanism of communication. Now, it's going to be around for quite a long time, but here's my story on that. So that was always my super backup. It's just like, if you pick up the phone and it's it's just my phone and there's no dial tone, wait, because we're used to it just getting back to us right away. Well, if 1,000 people go and pick up the telephone at the same time, the machine has to go through and go to every single one. So that was always my backup. I'm going to pick up the phone and I'm going to wait and I'm going to make a phone call. And the first phone call I'm going to make is outside of the area, because then I don't need two lines. If I'm trying to call Miriam, it has to go out to the central office, and then it has to go back into Miriam. And if it's in the same area, that's really unlikely. So communication plan. In our family, we have someone in the Midwest that we all call to. They do all that. We send them email and all that. Now, fiber optic is what they're going to go and replace this with. The problem with fiber optic is that it does not carry the electricity to power it. So that means now you have to go and have some kind of auxiliary power on your phone system. So not only on your phone, but the router and all the connections that are there. Is this impossible? The answer is no. With the advent of power walls, you can even do that for your whole house. But this is not something that you just go and do. And so, after the fact, once you've had that problem, that's when you realize that you really need it. So some of the recommendations is that if you're going to go to all fiber, you're going to have a backup. You're going to power backup for it. And you want to have at least one non-cordless phone in your house, so that when you pick it up, it's not relying on the fact that it has power too, to be able to go back to your phone that's logged in there. Now, the American Legion has done a fantastic job at building an emergency communication infrastructure that is very similar to what they have down at Los Angeles Emergency Operations Center. And so that's a really great resource that we have. The problem that we have is we need organizations like the Pacific Palisades Community Council, Neighborhood Watch, Ryland groups, CERT groups, to be able to organize it. And what I mean by that is that if we all watch out for our neighbors, kind of like Neighborhood Watch, when something bad happens, we can be able to provide that situational awareness that then can get fed back to the American Legion or up to the EOS. Now, what I found was really fascinating is that this technology has been really improving, such that in the radio room at the EOC, excuse me, not EOS, the EOC, is that when someone reports in and says, my power's out here, we can put a pin on the map and we can be able to then have people from LADWP and these other people come and see that. So it's really, it's this communication that we have to really work together to be able to do it. And the fact of the matter is they're not coming. So my call to action is to start to become aware of what you can be able to do to be able to watch out for your neighbors, to get to know them, to be able to figure out what's going to be kind of your communication and all that. And the way that we started in our family is you just say, okay, well, first I want to cover my family. I want to know. So my son's on the East Coast, so he now knows what to do. My niece is in Santa Monica, this kind of thing. Then it goes out to the next level, which is, what about my neighborhood? Janet lives across the street from me. Can I be able to, if something happens, it's just like, are they okay over there? Yeah, they're okay. Okay, we don't have to worry about that. But if there's a problem, then we can be able to help. So the first thing is to have that checklist. That's where that other piece that I was showing you, that booklet, is really powerful. Ready Your LA Neighborhood, Ryland, is another good program that you can be able to do. And, having a working radio in your house, these things are like $20. They just need, 4 batteries and you're off to the races. Learn how to use it. What's its limitations? We did a number of trainings on how to be able to do that. We generally will talk to CERT, but because of the generosity of the American Legion, we will be putting on these kinds of really short courses to be able to figure out how to use this thing effectively. Then, as I said, notify LA. If our infrastructure is there, we're good to go. Pulse Point is another one because it kind of tells you what kind of events happen. And then we have these more formal services like the ACS, which is a volunteer group interfacing in. And then we have CERT, which is just an amazing organization to be able to help with recovery efforts and saving people. The communication service is just radio, period. So it's very specific. CERT covers the whole gamut. And then we have organizations like the American Legion and the Pacific Palisades Community Council. So
Hank, can I interject for just a second?
absolutely.
Will you go back to your previous screen for a second? Okay, so I think when you and I spoke, you explained to me that you are part of the auxiliary communication service.
Correct.
And so you get a certain amount of information from that city service that you can then forward to the community.
Yes.
And then what I sort of wanted to share and frame this conversation was that I'm sure most board members will remember that we had the LA Fire Councils at our PPCC meeting a few months ago, and they suggested to the community that various groups of people in different parts of town, in different neighborhoods, come together and form fire councils. What was the purpose? The purpose was that they would come together and learn how to harden their homes. And so they could share that information with their little neighborhood. And so every pocket of the Palisades would become hardened. A, it'd be easier to get insurance, and B, you'd be less likely to, sort of fall victim to the destructive elements of a fire. Then I talked to you, and it sounded like in order to make the ham radio network work, you needed the same thing, pockets of people in the Palisades to be aware of the work you do and to somehow be an extension of it. Yes. So in our attempt to sort of, and I should add, everyone, that I've also talked to LAFD this week and doing a fire drill here in the Palisades, an evacuation drill in the Palisades. Only because I've noticed that when the slightest thing happens in any street or a major roadway, all of our streets get backlogged. So this, everyone, is part and parcel of how we as Palisadians can take part in these 2 or 3 different sorts of things that we can do to keep ourselves safe in the event that, you know, the greater government does not come through so easily. So I would love for you to tell us how the ham radio works and how people can be part of it, or would have to be part of it in order for it to work.
Exactly. And so years and years ago, I was working with Sharon Browning, and she lives in Rustic Canyon. And she had told me that the Rustic Canyon Homeowners Association there had organized, and they had figured out, worked with the city to be able to pre-stage emergency supplies down in Rustic Canyon Park. And I was fascinated by this. So we have all these HOAs. Those are really good organizations that can be able to get the granularity that we need. So, and that's where the efforts of CERT and Ryland and all that, what I'm focusing in on is that when you get these people together like this, when we're doing that, informing people how to be able to communicate effectively, how to be able to get information effectively, very narrowly, because that, if you don't have that, that's when chaos starts to kind of bubble up. So fire councils are really great. And I would point people to what Topanga Canyon has done, because they are so threatened and so close to that wilderness urban boundary that they've done a really good effort to do that. And that's all based on, as a core, as the base level of this, how do people communicate and become situationally aware? And that's what was really great about the American Legion stepping up, is that that's kind of the second tier. And what we need to do now is get that first tier so that we can get that information, because once you get that information and have a way to get it to people like me down at the American Legion, is that now it can go into that bureaucracy. Now we can be able to have them deploy those resources in the most critical areas, because there's not enough of them. I mean, at any one given time, there's 21 firefighters on duty. 21. There are 50,000 people. 21. They're not going to, they can't do that. And they're going to protect the big value assets.
Right.
LAUSD, you know, very large kinds of things, not Hank's house on Lockman Lane that has 2 people and a dog. So the way that you guys can help on this is using your megaphone to have people start to prepare, get your mindset there, just run through a scenario in your own mind. I'm not trying to freak you out. What I'm trying to do is just say that if you spent just a little time talking and thinking about it, you can be able to reap the benefits. Like me knowing before anyone on the West Coast knew that my son was okay in a disaster zone.
Okay.
Yes, Joanna.
Just a quick question. So
Sure.
assuming everything goes perfectly, each neighborhood gets one of these councils together, how does that relate back to the ham radio? Like, would then the point person for that neighborhood be in contact with you directly in the case of emergency, or how would that play out?
Yeah, the way that these things can be organized, and this is kind of up to us, is that you generally will have like a block or 2 of where you know those houses and you kind of know what's going on, and someone does a quick assessment. And they would then contact up to either like an HOA level or something that's a little larger. And then from there, then it would flow into the K6 IRL. And then we could be able to then pass that information up to the Los Angeles Emergency Operations Center. So that's kind of that flow of information, because there's so much information. We want to make sure that we filter that out and get really important information, but that that really fine-grained information can be a lifesaver for your street, right? I know that that couple over there is a little old. He's got a machine. Is Jean okay? And the answer is, Jean, are you okay? Yes, he is. Okay, I don't have to bother anyone with that. I don't have to say, hey, can someone do a life check? No.
Okay, so I think Chris also has a question. I think you have a few more slides to go through. Should we let you finish before we take questions? I think ultimately the question is going to be, how do we get, how do we help pronounce the reach of the ham radio?
Yes, no problem. So
okay.
I just wanted to, essentially get you, if there's one thing that you get out of today, is to go get this emergency prep booklet. That's, it's very simple. And what I want to do is to work with you. And as you start to look at how do we build these fire councils, look at just the communication piece. I've learned something over my short life, and that is that you focus and then you can finish. If you go too wide, then it just gets diffused. So all I want to be able to help people do, and the American Legion has a great place to do that. They've made the investment on training tools and those kinds of things to teach people how to use these simple radios. So I want some leaders in each one of those, and that's what they're going to talk about. LAFD is getting leaders for these, fire groups, and that's what we, as a community, really need to foster and know how it works.
Okay, perfect.
Yes.
Everyone, I'm going to share with you.
So I'm all
pretty soon.
done.
I'm going to share with you a picture. Okay, I was going to share a picture of the American Legion ham room because it's pretty impressive. And then Chris has a question, and so does Brian Espin. So Chris, and then Senior Lead Officer Brian Espin.
Yay, go ahead.
So it's not a question so much, and I thank you, Hank. It's always important to get this information.
Yes.
So I've been on the board for quite a long time, more than 10 years, and we've had periodic updates from various emergency prep people. Most of them saying what you're saying. You're giving us a little more information about the ham radio, and that's great. But I do want to call everyone's attention to the fact that we have a very extensive web page on disaster readiness, and it already includes links to that emergency booklet, to the Notify LA, to the fire, what's it called? The fire alert system, to CERT, to the Topanga Canyon, Fire Safe Council. I mean, it's almost too much. It kind of gets overwhelming to people. I'm not sure how to organize it any better, but I kind of kept that up for years, and it's still there. And if you take a look at it, Hank, and let Mariam know if we should add something more to that, let us know. That's all I wanted to let everyone know. It's on pacpaliscc.org under resources, and then you go to disaster readiness. Thank you.
And Casey has done a lot with community council, and that's the problem is, where do I start on this big, huge thing? And mine is, start with your family. And then we can work out in successive circles to be able to support that. Brian, go ahead.
How you doing? I used to be one of the CERT instructors, so I just want to jump on Hank's bandwagon here. We, LAPD, as well as the fire department, we encourage every community neighborhood to be very self-reliant when it comes to emergencies, because when, as Hank said, when the stuff does hit the fan, you might not see a police car or fire truck for hours, days, weeks, months, depending on how significant the event is. So the whole idea of having your neighborhood, your streets, your blocks, it's very similar to the neighborhood watch kind of premise, where you have people on your street that are knowing the neighbors, knowing what the concerns or issues are within certain neighbors, whether they're elderly, medical issues, and then relay that information almost like it's, for us, we call it an incident command system.
Yes.
You relay that information up to the next level. So you have several blocks or HOAs within the Palisades. They will all, in a sense, relay all that information to Hank and his team, then relays that info into our emergency center, which gets back to us. So it's that tier system, that tier progression, but it is very important, as Hank said, it starts with the family. Have a plan, a small plan, whatever it is, of how you're going to get out, how you're going to communicate, and where you're going to meet, and then work your way and expand your way out to your neighbors and then to the streets. So, Hank, excellent presentation, and I really encourage that within the Palisades, because that's key. That's going to be we're going to be on our own when something does happen. It's police and fire are going to be tasked with going to the areas where we can do the greatest amount or greatest good for the greatest number. So the smaller neighborhoods, residential, you won't see many fire trucks or police cars for a while.
And that
Okay,
was
thank
what,
you.
what I really learned too. So here's a picture of one of my fellow
You took-
hammers, Greg
Yeah.
Glenn, at the K6 IRL station. And there's a series of radios there. We have, ways to be able to communicate. And I want to bring up one of the questions that came in the chat was, what about Starlink and satellite phones? I have one because of that. After, my story was, I don't use my landlines very much. I'm on my cell phone. One day I pick up my phone and I'm kind of going, hey, my phone doesn't work. I wonder how long that's been like that. So I call and, go through Frontier and all that, and they do all this testing, and they're all saying, I don't know, it must be your house. It's like, no, I know it's not my house. I hate to tell you that. And so it took them 3 weeks to get my phone back. And the reason why is there had been a little fire, and that fire was in one of their vaults, and that vault wiped out 2,000 phone lines. And that what they did is they go, I don't know where all these phone lines go. There's been a lot. So they said, we're just going to wait till people call us and tell us that it's broken. And it's just like, you're killing me. And so that's why I went out and got Starlink, because I can be able to now use that to be able to go up. And I have battery backup on my house, like a Tesla wall. And so that's how you can be able to do it. But it takes some thinking.
So I want to bring up a few things, and time is an issue, but I just want to bring up a couple of things. One is that both you and Officer Espin are talking about groups of people
Yes.
who can come together and sort of begin sort of a domino effect of communications. And both of you have mentioned HOAs. We don't actually have HOAs on this board. I'm beginning to wonder why. I actually have started talking to our bylaws committee about bringing on HOAs because one, the Santa Monica Civic Association would like to join us. And I'm beginning to wonder if it wouldn't do us some good to have their representation. I am going to try to take some of this news to them and see if that's a way to start these small groups of people who, whether they harden their homes or begin to learn about communication, that might be good for them. But I have a question for you. When we talk about copper landlines and fire, don't answer me yet. Just hear me through and then answer me.
Sure.
When we talk about copper landlines and fire, wouldn't the copper not perform very well in the case of fire? That's my first question. My second question is, these companies are coming in and putting in fiber optic lines. Is the promise of fiber optic lines the fact that they'll perform better, in a fire emergency situation? 3C is that there's a company, it happens to be AT&T, I could be wrong, maybe there are other companies that are trying to contract in the same way, but Officer Espin, they're apparently trying to put some sort of command center like the one you were talking about, some sort of emergency command center in the hills so that communities like ours would not break down in communication. And I say all of this again because it seems to me that, if somebody gets a flat tire on the bottom of Marquez, this entire community grinds to a halt because all of the streets get clogged pretty quickly. I mean, that might be a little bit of an exaggeration, the flat tire, but not much. So I guess I would like to know, I would like to know how this community can make sure that we can communicate, like hear from you, Officer Espin, to figure out who's evacuating, where they're going, what routes not to take, and just to, as you say, be aware of each other. If somebody down the road and to the left really needs help getting out. It just seems to me that we're going to be have to rely on, maybe it's not copper lines and maybe it's not the fiber optic lines. Maybe it is your ham radio. Maybe it's walkie talkies, but it does seem to me that shy of somebody coming in here and running some sort of evacuation drill, which is not going to happen anytime soon because apparently they're quite expensive and the fire department doesn't like to do them. we should at least be able to have an idea as a community how best to communicate.
I can address a couple of those, and then Brian can talk about it from the city's perspective. So the drills are really great. We had a Mandeville drill several years ago, and it really highlighted a lot of those problems. We went and then proposed to be able to put up a communication method inside the canyon. The city of LA gave us a $200,000 grant, and we started putting that stuff in, and then COVID hit. So there's that infrastructure that's being built as a pilot to be able to deal with those things. Copper versus fiber. The beauty that copper did, it's not going to, copper isn't going to be any more resilient to that fire burning underneath the thing than fiber. They both melt, they both fall apart. The beauty that copper provided is that it had its own power source. So you didn't have to do anything. Your phone just kept working, even if the power to your house went away or to your neighborhood or those kinds of things.
I see. Okay.
And that's the biggest difference. And so that with fiber, fiber is really great. It's more reliable, it's faster, it has all these other features to it. But now at the end nodes, you have to provide battery backup in some form or method for it to continue to work. And that's not that's not horrible. It's just, wow, if we can't get people to figure out how to be able to talk to one another, it's pretty hard for them to say, you need to make an investment into a UPS. So that I don't, as far as a command center, that's above my pay grade.
Okay, so we're going to go to Courtney and then David Card and Brian Espin. Please hold your thoughts because we will hear from you again. Courtney, then David Card.
Okay, thank you so much, Hank. This has been incredibly informative. I just had a quick question. My brother-in-law lives in Santa Barbara, and for a while he lived in a very, very, very remote, like near the Chumash Indian Reserve. And in order for him to buy his house in his community, they had to learn to become volunteer firefighters. Is that something that you think might be beneficial or would suggest for community members here?
Well, my dad was a volunteer fireman in the community that I was in Northern California. And I think that what I'm trying to really do is we don't have to be that complex. I think that the base level is learning how to be able to communicate with one another in an organized fashion. And that's really low-hanging fruit. Yes, we could be able to learn. That's kind of what CERT is for you. So, if I was to do that for your brother-in-law today, what I would say is, okay, in order for you to own this house, you have to go through CERT training, because they're going to go through, how do I deal with bleeding? How do I deal with clearing a room? How do I deal with the incident command? I am really focused. I'm just saying, how do I talk? And so if you can just be able to get it down that, I think that really increases the chance that you're going to get people to take it up, and they're going to go, and it's going to be the most valuable, because it doesn't matter how much higher level stuff you have. If you can't talk, it's over. It's so weird, right?
Yeah.
David had his hand up.
David, thanks.
Hi, Hank. I have a question.
Certainly.
I have a landline because our AT&T cell service here is one tiny little bar and doesn't always work. So we have always had a landline since 1978. How much longer can we keep that before we're cut off by the big cable companies?
Well, I'm not sure. I think that one of the parts that really isn't clear, and this is what I'd want to know from our friends at AT&T. I ruined a phone one time because I was so mad, because here I was talking on my AT&T phone and it suddenly stopped working. And I'm in Marquez, I could see the stupid thing, and they just prioritized me off. And it was just like I was in the middle of a big call. And it was just like, wow, that's really tough. I think that they will solve that by saying we have fiber to your house. So their thing is getting past that radio waves and getting into that, into a fiber thing. But, and this is the big but, and just the thing I want to raise in your awareness is you got to have electricity to that. So they'll have a plan. And So I'm pretty confident of that. It's just, yeah, are you going to have it together to go, oh, was I supposed to have that battery?
Yeah, they're already
So-
trying to sell us on the fiber cable
Sure.
Frontier, and so is AT&T. And that's why I'm worried that we're going to be cut off sooner than later. And
Yes, I would-
So,
we're gonna have
David
to
Card,
try-
we've got AT&T coming. I did reach out to
Right.
them. They did respond. They said they had a new community engagement person. So we'll get Frontier and then we'll get AT&T and we'll ask these questions. But I don't know who on this call has this answer, but when we were downtown a few months ago and we heard from the wildland fire people, Hank, I'm pretty sure I told you this. They told us, and I can say Sue and I were very surprised. They said that evacuation orders come only by landline. Brian, is that true? So if you're one of those, okay. They literally said, if you don't have a landline, you will not
Yep.
hear from LAPD. And that seemed crazy. That seemed just,
The
irresponsible.
majority of the evacuation notices do come from landline, but you can sign up with your cell number through Hank might know better, but I don't know if it's Ryland or it's the city emergency, but you can sign up your cell phone to get a notification.
Yeah, notify LA, and that's what
There
that
it is.
thing that I called WIA, which
Yeah.
is wireless emergency access. So there are layers that are in here. I don't want to alarm everyone that, oh my gosh, it's more of like, we just have a paradigm change. So, and it's just, we just need to talk amongst each other and figure out how we're going to do that. And
That seems to me like that would be very good advice to register your cell phone so that you can get that phone call. I mean, just
Yes.
basic information. I would not have known unless I'd been downtown in an office. All right, Daphne Gronick and then Valeria. Questions? And
I
then we'll
just
wrap.
wanted to comment on the thing that David said, as well as we had a situation where some of the alarm systems don't work in terms of the automatic signals when you have the fiber optic. So we actually have, at this point, a fiber optic line with our internet, plus we have a copper line because it wasn't working without it. The signal is too fast and some of the systems don't work. So they don't tell you that when they tell you to upgrade, and they just, when I asked the question, they said, oh, don't worry about it, and it clearly didn't work. And luckily we were able to reverse it, but some of them won't do it. So just people for security issues and security cameras, and if you have a central station, that can also be an issue with some of the fiber.
Absolutely. And that was one of the things that Greg found, because he's a good engineer, technical solution, when they came and started pitching him in the, fiber, which I would love to have because it's really fast. He started asking some of these questions, and so he wasn't prepared. And he said, I need to do this. He had an older father, and so he wanted to make sure. So it's going to be one of those things where we really have to watch out for ourselves by being informed and taking responsibility to make sure things like that. So Daphne, I applaud your sharing that information.
I think the same thing happened to Sue Cole, where they came to change out her lines, and she sort of asked a few questions and then realized she didn't want it to happen. Valeria, I know your hand is up, but I quickly want to say, Chris, you had dug up something where some a handful of California Congress people had objected to this idea that landlines, copper lines were being cycled out in very high fire hazard severity zones. It happened that our Congressman Brad Sherman was not one of those people, but I do want to say to the board, once we do hear from Frontier and then from AT&T, maybe this is something we'd like to push on. Maybe the community council will talk and we'll pass a motion, and maybe we'll be, we'll join the ranks of people who say, not so quickly, not to cycle out copper lines out of at least our very high fire severity zone. Valeria?
This is a question that I'm going to raise at these meetings with Verizon and AT&T, but I wanted to ask Hank and the board here. So I'm on Paseo Miramar. I'm at the very top, and we tried to get Frontier FiOS, but they were unable to do that. And then they closed out our phone line. So we're currently without a phone line, or we have internet through Spectrum, but we don't have any other form of communication. And this has been going on for a year now. So I'm wondering if we're at a very high fire zone. Paseo Miramar is adjacent to the state park, at the very top of the hill. If there's any sort of resources or wording that I could bring up at the meeting in June or end of May.
Yeah, I think that the real question becomes on something like that is, so how do I get 911? And there's a huge infrastructure that's built all around that. And that's part of, they came up with the E911, which is how you do it over cell phones and these kinds of things. But Brian can probably really speak to some of those aspects.
Well, thank you for that, Hank. Valeria, remember that. Let's ask them just simply, how would you get through to 911? I think it's important for our community to understand. I mean, maybe we do have to find a balance between fiber optic and copper, but I don't think we're ready to let go of copper just yet, not until we have a plan. And thank you for reminding us that they did the evacuation drill up in Mandeville Canyon. I did not know that a plan came of it. I did know that the city gave them about $200,000 and that COVID hit and they didn't do anything, but I'm heartened.
Well, we did work on it and it continues apace. So our group, ACS, was the one, Michael Schlenker, Bill Koss, and I really spearheaded that and worked through the dizzying bureaucracy to be able to get that to happen.
So conceivably, if they finally agree to do some sort of an evacuation drill here, we could emerge with a plan.
Absolutely. And we could also, I would suggest that if that happens, that we go in with a plan and use that as an opportunity to be able to level set what worked, what didn't work, because those kinds of drills, that's what CERT's so good at, right? CERT has drills, they have all these things, gaining that familiarity, what worked, what didn't work.
Okay, good to know. I will stay in touch with you. I just spoke to Tracy Park about it on Saturday. She said, absolutely. I mean, she was fully eager. I think she understands.
I love her.
Yeah, she understands all the threats and, she's got fleeting resources, because she has to oversee an entire district, but she really was very open to the idea of working on having a drill here. So I look forward to that. And I look forward to a plan emerging. All right, everyone. So you know how to get a hold of Hank. I will remind you all how to get a hold of the LA Fire Council people. I think a lot of this is on us. We're going to have to learn how to communicate, and B, where we want to advocate politically. So I think, thank you, Hank, so much. I think we're all that much more informed now than we were about an hour ago, and I have you to thank for it. So thanks for making the time to come out and present to us.
Thank you for the opportunity. I look forward to, putting that kind of stuff together. It's like putting together a bocce league, right? The only way you're going to get that is you have to have someone who has that list, and then you start organizing it. And that's what we can be able to do from the community council out to the community.